Hello rail fans and model railroaders, Boulder Creek Yard here with a instructional video on how to lay ballast down on your track in a coal flood loader area. This is somewhat specialized. It's not your general how-to ballast tutorial. That might come later. But this one is more focused on what I'm currently doing now with ballasting in a area where they load a lot of coal and a lot of coal gets spilled in the ground. So I have this kind of cool failed print here. This is a print that I got off of Thingiverse. It is a ballast spreader. You pour the ballast in here and it floods out onto the track and you spread it out after that. You can do this step with either just the bag itself or a spoon. Either one works. I happen to have a 3D printer so I can make this. This one is a failed print. It should be quite a bit taller than it actually is. But you know, I went with what I had. I didn't feel like it really needed that extra space. If you're doing a lot of track over a long distance, you might want that. But you know, it's not a huge deal. So I don't own the rights to any of the photos that I've been basing this all off of. So if you want to look at what I've been looking at, look up Kentucky or Appalachia coal flood loader. You'll find a whole bunch of photos of what the ballast kind of looks like. Usually it's not this well cared for, and usually there isn't this raised bed, but I think I'm just gonna go with the raised bed. I like the look of it a little bit more. Usually this area of track is not well maintained. I don't know if the railroad needs to maintain it or if it's maintained by the property owner or the mine owner, but usually it's just very horribly maintained. There's coal everywhere for obvious reasons. Say one of the gates got stuck open or something like that. So we're going to start with some HO scale ballast from Arizona Rock and Mineral. This might be kind of hard to get a hold of right now. Check your local train shops and hobby stores if you can't find it online. I bought this stuff from the train shop, as you can see from the tag right there. This is the CSX, or Southern Pacific Wabash Gray. It's pretty close to what CSX used in the Kentucky area. It's pretty close to what the railroads used in Kentucky or other parts of Appalachia. So really this is kind of going to get covered up with a lot of coal. I still feel that it looks best if you have a layer of this underneath the coal. Maybe they came through and reballasted recently, something like that. But back here I also have a bunch of this Arizona Rock and Mineral coal. This right here is the dust version. This stuff back here is kind of in between. It's what's known as fine coal. This stuff right here, on the other hand, and I'm not going to open this up yet, but it is medium coal. It's quite a bit thicker, quite a bit grainier. The best way that I've found to do this is if you're working near the end of a track because it goes off a module, etc. I put a little bit of painter's tape right here. It acts as just enough of a dam to stop it from going over the edge. So after you've got your tape down, if you need it, you just slide your hopper where you want it and fill it up. If you're using a spoon, well, you just spoon it on. And you just kind of slide it back and forth. You see how it kind of builds up the side there. If you kind of towards the edge, you can just lift it up a little bit. It dumps a little bit extra down there that you can smooth out towards the end of the track. So one thing about this hopper, I really feel it should have a slightly lower center section. It seems to fill in pretty evenly. which you would think wouldn't be a problem, but it can kind of load up the edges a bit too much, so you just work it down your track. Refilling is needed. One of the reasons that I like the shallower size of this is you don't overload it. If you load it too much and you pick it up, it leaves big piles like you kind of see over here. So this thing isn't perfect. It can leave a bit to be desired on the edges here, but I just go in and kind of fill it in as needed. If you have a lot of sloping, you might want to put a little bit of glue on the slope there. I haven't found the need to do that, but I can definitely see why it would be needed. So then I kind of take my fingers and just push the ballast down. Then I grab a bunch of different styles of brushes. After I go through and run my finger down the edge. So what I'm doing here is kind of just knocking down. You get a little bit of a lip right there. I'm knocking that lip down. And one thing you may do with the brush as you brush this stuff off is you kind of create another lip there. But that's easy to fix. So as you create that, you just kind of come back. And tamp it down. And it kind of works its way in there. Sorry about the crappy focus, but you want to make sure you don't have anything. Sorry about the bad focus. You want to make sure you don't have anything in the inner webbing here of the rail. I like to just drag a pin down it. And free everything. And make sure to do both sides. That kind of also has the added benefit as it skips across the spikes, that it kind of drives the ballast down a little bit. So what you see here is kind of how it would be for a normal main line. A little bit nicer, a little bit more of the ballast down in the rails, or down in the sleepers. But like I said, not maintained very well. We're gonna mess it up a little bit here shortly. As you kind of massage the ballast around, you might notice that your fingers leave kind of high spots. You can just take a nice brush and kind of knock those out just by feathering it in there. Also, if you're tapping the rails, that's fine too. That will kind of move some of the ballast down. Then if you look back here, I kind of messed up a little bit, got a little bit too far out there. There's some ground foam in there. Not really a huge deal, depending on the look you're going for. If you want nicely, freshly ballasted mainline, the weeds and such in there, it might not be what you're going for. If you got a little bit of road bed showing through, like right in here, you can either glue it down and see how it looks afterwards, or just pour a little bit more on. So if you look over in this kind of dark spot, I have to be careful there, because if you remember in an earlier video, I mentioned how I used red Sharpie to mark where the track is going to go. I forgot that Sharpie bleeds really badly when you get alcohol on it, so I cannot use any alcohol in that area. The scenic cement mixture that I'm using shouldn't cause any issues with that. But if you get alcohol on it as a wetting agent, it will just bleed like crazy. I'm dealing with that in another spot, and I kind of covered it up with coal, but I'm going to have to do a whole heck of a lot more weathering on it. One other thing you might want to do before you get to this stage is you might want to weather your track by painting it and whatnot. I haven't done that. I'll probably do that afterwards, and it's just kind of chicken or the egg type of thing. A lot of people will weather their track beforehand. I tend to weather it afterwards because it will bleed down a little bit into the ballast and make it look like it's a little bit more used. If you're going for that fresh look, for that fresh ballasted look, you might want to weather your track beforehand. So I have a building to go in here. Kind of need to mark an area to ballast out. I'll bring the surrounding stuff up around it later on. Probably with a little bit of dirt or something like that, but for now I'm just gonna come into that area that I marked. In some of the photos that I've seen, this whole area is actually gravel. I may come back and do that with a finer gravel, because they probably wouldn't use ballasted grade rock for that. But I also have some really thin, I tend to use N scale ballast for gravel in HO scale. It looks really good. I use, believe it's Pennsylvania Railroad ballast for my gravel. Anyways, I use my special tool that I have made up from a little bit of styrene and a sprue glued to it. And I just tamp it down. If I'm making a road, I'll just kind of drag it along. Get it nice and flat. Or stick my finger in it and mess it all up. Either way, it works out. Let's bring the building back. Kind of find where I want it to be. I think I'll have the piers or the foundation showing just a little bit. So we get it set in there nice and snugly. And we'll pull it off. Here's where I use a bit of the fine grade coal. I think this stuff might actually be coal. I'll have to look into it. Probably shouldn't be touching with my hands if that's actually the case. But especially in this area, you kind of want to just slather it on there. Spill it on the floor. Yeah, good measure. Yeah, say there was an equipment failure or something like that. Gate stuck open. Conveyor had a jam and just kept running and dumped it all over the ground. Something like that. Pretty much like that. And then you have these nice dark hands that you could probably light on fire pretty easily. So I know that that's quite a lot of product on the ground right there. That's quite a bit of money for the railroad. But it's also more expensive to have somebody come and clean it up. So they're just gonna leave it on the ground there. Maybe they'll sort it out later, I don't know. One thing I don't like about this stuff is it's a bit shiny. So I'm probably gonna come through with some dull coat or something when I weather the track. We're gonna just kind of clean the rail head here. Take our pin, blow out a spot of ballast there, and we're just going to drag it along the inside of the rail head, whatever it's called. Really, the only reason I do that is just to make sure that the locomotives and the cars can pass just fine. So at this point, like I said, I gotta be careful of that spot over there, but I just kind of give it a quick dousing. I know a lot of other people will actually straight up soak their ballast. I used to do that, but I don't think it's needed with a 2-to-1 mixture of Mod Podge. Just kind of come in. This coal kind of acts weird. You may need to tamp it down or spray some more alcohol on it. I have a reason for weathering afterwards, especially if you're using acrylic-based paints. As you see, I'm spraying a heck of a lot of alcohol on here. You know, enough to make a person from March of 2020 freak out a little bit. That will eat the paint. So I wait until after. If you're using an enamel or another solvent-based paint, shouldn't cause an issue to use alcohol. But if you're using acrylic, I've definitely had it mess with the paint, so that's specifically why I wait. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this glued down. So if you kind of go along the edge here before you go up into the actual ballast, it wicks up and it kind of breaks some of the surface tension. Depending on what stage you are at, depending on what stage you are in on your scenery, that wicking feature may cause a little bit of an issue for you. But if you have something that you're going to come along the edge and cover it up with, it's not a big deal. If the ballast is the last thing you have going down, you may need to soak it in alcohol just to get the wicking to not beat up the ballast. The last thing I suggest you do is kind of take your NMRA gauge, which you should definitely have one, and just run it down the track. I can't find mine right now for some reason, but if you run it down the track and you've got anything on top of the rails or on top of the sleepers themselves, that will kind of cut it down. You'll know if you're going to run into issues in the future. With that said, Boulder Creek Yard out.